Okay, if you're a man, please raise your hand. Okay, I want you to know you guys are my friends. I'll give you a bro hug right now if we were right next to each other, but I love you guys. And this weekend, we're having a men's retreat here at the church building. Troy has a sign-up table outside in the foyer, so after worship service, I encourage you men to come to this men's retreat. It's a good time to build friendship and relationship, and it's a good time to invite your friends too. So I want to encourage you to do that. If you have any questions, go see Troy after worship service. One of the groups of people that I really want to encourage today, I like to honor someone, is I want to honor the people who go and visit people after worship service and bring them communion. There's a lot of people that get forgotten. I remember I was speaking at this lectureship down in Mexico, and me and a few of my preacher friends, we saved up enough money to bring foods to some of the shut-ins and the poor. And we bought a whole bunch of food, and we brought it to these shut-ins, and a lot of the people who we visited said, "Thank you for coming. This is the first time we've seen Christians in over a year." And I remember getting heartbroken by that. And one was one of the founding ministers who started the church there. And so I want you to know that we need to remember those who aren't with us every week. And I just want to honor those who actually take time every Sunday to go and bring communion to them, because it really does mean a lot. As Clint said, communing with the Lord is really the premier thing we do in worship. I also want to encourage you, starting on December 2nd on Wednesday at 7 p.m., we have a class called Writing Your Love Story, and it's going to be a class on marriage. We want to have healthy marriages because we want a healthy church, and ultimately we want to glorify God. And so I want to encourage you to come to that class if you're able. I want to ask you a question. And I want to ask you the question, what if you knew you were going to die next week? What if you knew that you were going to have a funeral next week? And if you knew that you were going to have a funeral, you knew you were going to die, I want you to ask yourself, who do you think would actually show up and say something at your funeral? Do you think it would be well attended? Do you think people, when they have that opening, they say, does anyone want to share a story about the person who passed away? Do you think people would say, I have a story, and I just want to share it, and tears run down their eyes as they tell it, and laughter is spoken because they're just remembering you? Or do you think it would not be very well attended? How do you think your loved ones would write your obituary? I want you to think about that for a moment, because as a minister, I've done a lot of funerals. I've been to a lot of funerals, and there have been some that the whole church building is just full. I've done some where people were just standing up because there was not enough seating. And everyone was there, would be crying, and stories would be told, and everyone's laughing, and all these great things are being shared about this person. But I've also been part of funerals where I try to personally do a funeral for each specific person to really commemorate their life, and I would spend time with the loved ones, and they're like, just write down as much, just get it over with. That's the thought. They just said, just do the most generic funeral sermon you could do, let's get it over with. And I would go, and the building would be empty. And I think about that, and I think, how are we living our lives? Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 2 says that it's better to go to a house of mourning than a house of feasting, because in those moments when death occurs, when you go to the death place of a loved one, it really causes you to reflect on your life. And it causes you to think, how am I living? How am I going to be remembered? What is my legacy? And as a minister, and Lynn knows this, we're around death a lot. When you're around death a lot, you kind of think about it a lot. And I think about what James says about how life is so short. It's a vapor. It's a mist. It's not going to be here very long. We have a very limited amount of time on earth. How are we using it? How are people going to think about you? And as I think about myself, I think about death a lot. I was adopted. I was an orphan. I don't know my family medical history. I had health problems when I was a little infant being adopted. I worked in a chemical plant. you know what, there's a good chance I could die young. There's a part of the reason why I work so hard for the Lord and why I try to make the most of it, because I think I just don't know how much time I have on this earth. And I want, when people think about me, I want them to know he loved God and he worked with all of his heart by faith. But I want you to ask yourself, what are people going to say about you? How are people going to think about you? And I want you to ask yourself, what would you do if you got to read your own obituary? You know, there was a man that actually got to have this experience. A man by the name of Alfred Nobel. He was a Swedish scientist, chemist, engineer, businessman. He had over 355 patents and trademarks. He was just a genius man. But one day when he was picking up the newspaper, he went to the obituary section and he found his own obituary. And they called him the Merchant of Death because his company was an arms dealer. But what he was most well known for was he was the one who invented dynamite. And obviously with the noble purpose, he was thinking, I'm going to create dynamite in order to blast rocks and we can have manifest destiny, explore and build communications and travel and all sorts of things. But as we know, with the growth of dynamite, people use it for horrible reasons. And so when he was reading his obituary, he was just getting a shock and thinking, wow, this is how I'm going to be remembered. Everyone's going to think of me as a murderer, as a destroyer of life. Is that how I want to be remembered? And so he decided to change things up because the newspaper got it all wrong. This was 8 years before Alfred Nobel died. And in fact, it was about his brother. And Alfred Nobel knew about death. He was 4 of 8 children that actually survived at childbirth. And the obituary was about his brother, leaving him to be one of the remaining children in his family. But he didn't want to be one who was remembered as a merchant of death. So as we know, he was one who created what we know as the Nobel Prizes, so that he would reward those who would make an impact on humanity. And he left his estate, his wealth, because that's how he wanted to be remembered. And how do we remember him today? We don't remember him as the merchant of death. We remember him as the one who awards humanity. One of the things that we have to do as Christians is we have been called to serve. You know, we only have so much amount of time on this earth, and how are people going to remember you? I want you to think about the people who you went to their funeral. You shared a story. You actually went and you cried because you were sad that they were gone. What kind of people were they? How did they impact your life? How did they touch your life? You have to think, what's a meaningful life? What's an impacting life? Aren't they the ones who touched your life through their love and through their service? You don't go to a funeral and say, hey, I really thought that guy did a good job raising the company's money and bottom line. Or I'm so glad I went to his funeral because he had a nicer house than me. He drove a nice car. The people that we think about are those who have impacted our lives. They're the ones who are called servants and who have touched our lives because even though they could have used their time and energy on anything, they chose to serve people. That's why when you go to a funeral and you see it's full, you see people who said, that person served me. That person touched my life. And that's the kind of people we are called to be. We are called to serve. And it causes us to think, let's not wait till funerals happen. Let's not wait till we're at the end of our lives in regret, but take the time living here and now and asking ourselves, how can I utilize the time God has given me, the giftedness God has given me, the opportunities God has given me in order to touch lives and serve? Because if my desire, if my purpose in life is to glorify and worship God, how is he glorified? As Clint made known, he read Matthew 25, and Jesus on the day of judgment, he's going to be asking, who fed me? Who gave me something to drink? Who clothed me? Who visited me? Who showed me hospitality? Those are the things. What he's looking at is the heart of service. People will say, you know what, I could serve myself, but I have chosen to serve God. And I've chosen to serve other people out of my faith and love for God. As Christians, we are called to serve. And I think about this. Service has to be part of our culture here in the church. But when you think about all the great things happening, you know, in our culture, especially among young people, especially among the college students today, social justice is becoming one of the big things. It's the in vogue thing to do social justice, human trafficking, fighting against that, fighting against poverty, well waters, and things like that. I'm 100% for that. The book of Amos in the Old Testament is completely about social justice. Does God care about social justice? Yes, he does. That's the whole book of Amos. But one of the things that we see is they're getting involved in all these secular charities and philanthropies, which are fantastic, and they're benefiting humanity, but they stop at a certain point. And what separates the church from all these secular charities and philanthropies is Jesus. And one of the things that we often forget is we have to realize service is not the end. It's the means in order to glorify God. The means to create opportunities to share the gospel. The means to show the love of Christ. And so we're not doing ministries for the sake of ministries. We don't do it just because it's an in vogue thing to do, or just because we care about humanity. We care about them because we want them to know Jesus. We could cure cancer. We could bring fresh water to everyone. We could annihilate disease and all sorts. But if they don't know Jesus Christ, what good is any of it? And that's what things that really causes me to think. Do I really care about whether or not people know Jesus Christ? And am I serving and using my life in a way that helps people know about Jesus? And when I look at my life, do I see myself as a servant? And when we look at Jesus Christ, how do we view him? Do we view him mainly and only as a Savior who benefits us? Or do we see him as so much more? Why is it that Jesus touched your life? What if you were at the tomb of Jesus? What would you say? What would you have thought? What stories would you have shared? You know, every one of those disciples of Jesus would have had a story. But I think about this one, and when I think about service, I think about this passage of Scripture that Jesus shares. Because it really causes us to reflect on our lives. Am I really being a servant? Do I really understand service? And if I'm going to reciprocate and replicate Jesus Christ, how must I use my life? And who must I be? And how should the church be? In Matthew chapter 20, verse 20 through 28, it says this. Then the mother of the sons of Zebedee came up to him with her sons. And kneeling before him, she asked him for something. And he said to her, "What do you want?" She said to him, "Say that these two sons of mine are to sit, one at your right and one on your left in your kingdom." Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup I am able to drink?" And they said to him, "We are able." And he said to them, "You will drink my cup. But to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the two brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave, even as the Son of Man came, not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." You know, this is a powerful passage of Scripture for me, because a lot of us can relate to James and John, can't we? You know, and the mom's trying to put them in a prominent position, because at that time, they thought in worldly sense, they thought, you know, Jesus is going to set up this nationalistic kingdom, he's going to overrun the Romans, and we are the chosen governors. But how much more so would it be if we were on Jesus' left and his right? And this was a request of Zebedee's sons. And one of the things that we see here is that they make this request, and Jesus makes known, you know what, those places aren't mine to give. But let me tell you, can you drink the cup I drink from? And what did they say? They said so boastfully, yes, we can. We can do that. We can drink the cup from you that you can. But what they didn't understand was Jesus was not going to drink from a gold cup of a king. He was going to drink the cup of wrath meant for a servant. And if they thought they were going to be good enough to be on his left and on his right, they would be on crosses on his left and on his right. But they weren't. But Jesus was. And Jesus understood this concept, and he understood that his disciples, even though they had been with him for 3.5 years, they still didn't get it. They still thought, I want that prominent place of pride and position and power. I know I'm going to be a governor of Jesus, but I want to be a prominent governor of Jesus. That was their mentality. That was their mindset. And so Jesus knew that all the disciples were thinking that. And in fact, other gospels make known, they argued about who's the greatest. And Jesus is going to make known who the greatest is not those who have the most people serving them. The greatest is the one who is serving the most. It's a completely different dynamic. And that's how we view in the world. The greatest people are those who can get the most people to follow them and serve them. But Jesus defines it's about how much you can get on your knees and serve them. Those are the greatest people. And he uses terms like servant and slave. How many of you want to wake up in the morning and you write the story of your life and you say, I wish I want to be a servant and a slave today? Usually you want to say, I want to be the best top salesperson so everyone looks at me. I want to be the most attractive person so everyone just looks at me. We often put ourselves in a position that doesn't say servitude. But what does Jesus say? Jesus made known, even the Son of Man. You know, none of us are so prideful and arrogant to think that we can legitimately believe that we are greater than the Son of God. But the Son of God says, guess what? Even I didn't come here to be served. I came here to serve. And that makes complete sense because who was the greatest person to walk the face of this earth? Jesus Christ. And what did Jesus Christ do? He served every single person in human history. That's why he is the greatest. And that's why he teaches us about servitude and leadership. That's what he teaches us. He tells us, all the Gentile leaders, what they do is they try to be the greatest by lording it over you. Jesus had all authority. He is the Lord of Lords. And if he said, all of you in human history, get on your knees and serve me, he had every right to do that and be justified. But he didn't. He wasn't like the Gentile rulers. He wasn't like the worldly rulers. He was a servant. So the first thing we really have to realize is Jesus is this perfect servant. He was a servant. And I think about this. How much Jesus had to sacrifice to be a servant. Philippians 2:6-8. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. But he emptied himself by taking a form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. That is one of my favorite passages of Scripture. And I think about it because all I think about is how Jesus gave up the glory of heaven to become the poor son of a carpenter, also that he can learn servitude and be a servant, forego all of his rights, forego all of his privileges, all of his worship and comfort, in order to learn obedience to die. And I think about that. What do we do in our lives? We advocate our rights. If someone wrongs you, you say, I have a privilege and a right. Someone gets your order wrong at a fast food restaurant, it doesn't take much to get angry. You say, my privilege, my rights. Someone starts taking away your privileges and rights, and you fight. Because you say, how dare you? But Jesus didn't say that. He gave up the heavenly worship. He gave up the throne. He gave up comfort. all to come and die on a wooden cross. And even today, he's serving you. We see that in John 13, he did this for his disciples. He washed their feet, did the most disgusting things. And did you know that Jesus' servitude always brought the most disgusting things? One, he died on an ugly cross. Two, he's washing dirty feet. Nothing he does is really attractive. No one says, I want to be like Jesus because he does the most disgusting jobs. When we do church work days, how many of us say, hey, I want to be the first one to volunteer to clean the toilets? We don't do that. But Jesus did the dirty work. But even today, how is he serving us? 1 John chapter 2, verse 1 through 2. My little children, I'm writing these things so that you may not sin. But if anyone does sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. He is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. Did you know Jesus is serving you right now, standing before God the Father, making atonement for you? And that's a dirty job. How many of you would like to be a lawyer defending the guilty? Have you ever thought about that? Being a lawyer defending the guilty. And that's exactly what Jesus does for me, and that's exactly what Jesus does for you. And that would be a horrible job. But Jesus is serving you daily, even when you don't realize it, forgiving you of your sins, making notion. And when Satan throws sin out and says, God, but look at the sin of this person. Look at Micah's sin. Look at how he felt that way and thought that way and treated someone that way. Jesus stands up and says, my blood covers all. He serves. His death on the cross was the greatest service. So if we're imitating, if we're reciprocating and replicating Christ, what must we also be if Jesus is a perfect servant? If we want to be great, not only in this life, but in the life to come, what form must we take on? And that leads to us. We are called to be servants. To be a disciple of Jesus, you are called to serve. That means you have to serve. You have to be doing something. But it also is indicative and characteristic of who you are, and who you are is a servant. Let me ask you a question. In Ephesians chapter 4, it makes known the ones passage. And it says in that passage, how many lords are there? How many? One Lord. So if there is one Lord, what does that make the rest of us? Servants. If there is one Lord, then we are all called to be servants. And in fact, as you read the New Testament writers, the way they define themselves in their epistles are servants. That's what the church is called to be, are servants. And that's an honor. A lot of us take pride in our occupation saying, hey, I work for Delphi and I'm a great guy. I work for Chrysler, I'm a great guy. And we exalt our positions. We exalt the company we work for. And we're proud of it, and we should be. We should be proud of the hard work we do. God honors hard work. But if we take pride in the companies we serve and the great positions we have gained, how much more so should we be able to say, I serve the Lord of Lords, the King of Kings. And he has allowed me to be his servant, to live in his house for eternity, have a relationship with him. You see, we are called to be servants. And sometimes we have a hard time doing this. And I can tell you, in my spiritual growth, in my maturity, one of the things that I've learned is that I need to learn to be a servant. And it's so hard to do that, even in the spiritual sense. When we come among the body, when we do worship service, when we gather together in a variety of different things, it's easy to try to make ourselves Lord, isn't it? My wants. How are other people in the church meeting my wants? How are they meeting my needs? How are they meeting my feelings? How come the song leader's not picking the songs I like? Mark. Actually, Mark does a great job. I love those songs. But, what if I had that attitude? What if I had the attitude that says, well, not everyone came and shook my hand today? Well, Or, they decorated the church building not in the way that I would have. We come among the body and sometimes we can make ourselves lords. But here's the thing. The church does not exist in order to serve you as Lord. The church exists to help you learn to be a servant of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
So the church does serve you, but its sole purpose is not to serve you. Its sole purpose is to help you learn to be a servant. Because where there's one Lord, there's one Lord. And I think about this. One of the things that I was talking with some of our deacons about, and I think our deacons are some of the most amazing men you'll ever meet in your life. But one of the things they said is sometimes we don't even know, the church doesn't know what we do. And one of the things, as I mentioned, what sets apart our ministries from the philanthropy things of the world? It's Jesus Christ. That's the whole concept of why we say in our mission statement, loving people one step closer to Christ. Not loving people one step closer to happiness, but to Jesus Christ. Because we are constantly pointing people upward. And one of the things that I want us to do real quickly is I want us to quickly go over some of the ministries of the church. And one of the things, and I'm going to go through them really quickly so we're not going to be here all day, but one of the things I want you to do is in looking at this, I want you to celebrate God. Because he allows us to serve in these ways. I want you to think about how some of these things that we do is making a huge impact both within the church and in our community. I also want you to think about how you should spend time in prayer, praying for these ministries, because ultimately we're trying to bring people one step closer to Christ. I also want you to take a moment and think about how can I get involved. Every one of these ministries needs help. And a lot of times we don't think that because we think, it's getting done. But let me tell you this, if we're all called to be like Jesus, we're all called to be servants. Which means God is calling us to have 100% participation rate in serving within the church. No one's exempt from it. And in fact, James shows us, faith without works is what? Dead. And in fact, James gives us 2 examples of excuses that we would say. Where there's a great need, is us, hey, a brother's hungry and in need of food and clothing, and you say, hey, I'll pray for you. Isn't that the generic Christian thing to say? I'll pray for you. I won't do anything, but I'll pray for you. Now I need to go get my mocha frappuccino from Starbucks. And that doesn't make sense to me. Or another one that says, you know what, I'll believe in God, but I'll let you do the work. I'll show you my faith and you show me your deeds. That doesn't work either. See how James kind of annihilates a lot of those concepts of illegitimate faith? We are all called to serve. And no service, and remember, one of the things I've told you, Christ has never asked you to do something he wasn't willing to do first. He was willing to die, wash feet, forgive you of your sins. So I want you to think about the impact we're making. Ask yourself, how can I get involved? How can I help? How can I pray? And I want you to think, we don't do ministries for the sake of doing ministries. It's worth it. Glorifying God is worth it. Touching lives is worth it. So let's ask ourselves, how can you serve? Where will you serve? I want us to quickly go over this. I'm going to have some of our young men pass out some sheets of paper with our ministries. And I want you to pray about these. Put them up somewhere. Pray about it. Get involved. If God has pressed on your heart somewhere to serve in one of these areas, then do it. We all need help. If our purpose is to glorify God, what does he tell us in Matthew chapter 5? So that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. That's how we glorify God. But I want us to quickly look at some of these. And I want you to know, when I came to interview here, one of the main things that made me excited, other than our eldership, is that you guys did so much in the community and in the church because you want to glorify Christ. Bring people one step closer to Christ. So let's look at some of the things we do. Sunlight Station. The statistic nowadays is, and I want you to think, all these ministries we do have an evangelistic tent on them, or they should, because we're trying to bring people to Jesus. Sunlight Station, we have a preschool here. Our ladies are some of the hardest working ladies in the church. There's a statistic right now that says that 95% of adult American converts had some exposure to a Bible class or a VBS or a preschool that was Christian related. 95% of adult converts. That's a huge. Golden Agers. You know, they gave me the opportunity to share with them, but our elderly, they have so much wisdom. And them realizing how important they are and seeing them grow in their faith and reaching out to people their age too is inspiring. Vin Woods and King's Kids. This is one of the things that we do in the summer and also in fall right now with King's Kids is we go out to a part of our community and we actually feed them and we also share with them a Bible lesson. So not only are we feeding them physically, we're feeding them spiritually. Life groups. This is where we grow closer to one another. The church, when the church grows and we're becoming that church like we read in Acts chapter 2. We're building community with one another and love for one another. Buildings and grounds. You know, can you imagine if we had no heating during the wintertime, no air conditioning during the summer, a messed up parking lot? It would be horrible. We take those things for granted, and I can tell you, John and Corey and so forth, they're always here. And they could probably use some help. And Mike, who mowed the lawn, fantastic. Also need help with that. Our youth group, you know, Mike and Tom do a great job, and Tony and some of the other people, you know, they do a fantastic job helping supplement your teachings of Christ to help build up their faith. Adult Bible classes. You know, we don't just have Bible classes for the sake of having Bible classes. Our desire is reading the book of Ephesians. We are growing together in order for us to have that love and unity that Christ has called us to have. And when we're equipped, we can serve more effectively. Children's Bible classes, same thing. We do it for the kids in order to build up their faith. Same statistic. You get them early. Remember the saying, if you don't teach kids about Jesus, how to live life, the world will. That's a true statement. That's why we have it. Children's Worship Nursery. You know, there's people serving right now that are missing this fantastic sermon because, that was a joke. But just because they're serving you so that you can pay attention and grow in your faith, they sacrifice for you. We're the cutest kids in the world, don't we? Fellowship. And that includes potluck and events and a variety of different things, funerals, weddings. And you know, those are times where there's a lot of work that goes into them. You know, a lot of work that goes into them. And we take that for granted because we're too busy scarfing down hot dogs. But there's a lot of work in that. Greeter services. You know, they now say that because people's short-term thinking and so forth and the way that they're exposed to so much information, visitors make their impression of the church within 7 seconds of walking in a church building. That's the new statistic. 7 seconds. And you know what? The first line of showing the love of Christ are our greeters. That makes a huge difference. And welcoming people, encouraging people, getting people's information so that we can encourage them, that's huge. World missions, you know, the Great Commission. One of the things that we do is we don't only care about ourselves. We don't care only about Kokomo. We care about the outer reaches. And you know, you talk with people like Lynn and you talk with people like Troy, and you see their fire for God, for missions, and you're like, yes, that's how God must feel. It's the whole reason why we have the Great Commission. We want all people to be saved. Athletic ministries. You know, this opportunity to build fun, but also build connections in the community in order to show the love of Christ. This is us. Last summer, we won 4th place. And we came back almost every single game to win. And so I already started telling some of the guys on our softball team, we need to start exercising and getting in good shape so that next year we can get 3rd place. Dream big. Vacation Bible School. Same reason. We're trying to build faith in our kids and outreach to the community. And you know what? We have some fantastic Vacation Bible School things. Clothing giveaway. You know, Matthew 25, right there. How much clothes did we give out? And you know what? We could do so much more with this because if we had more people involved, we could talk with more people, educate more people about Christ and the church, and also just build those relationships. But look at how much donations you've done, and look at how much like the Warners do. They worked really hard too, by the way. They were here from dawn to dusk. But they could always use more help. The MHA Thanksgiving dinner. That's happening tomorrow. I didn't have a picture for it, so we're just going to have to deal with Charlie Brown. But look how thankful they are. But be involved with that. The benevolent meals. You know, when people have surgeries or move into the area, you guys fatten people up. You know, when I first moved here, I gained like 15 pounds because of you. And I've never heard of this. I'm from the Northwest. And, you know, chicken and noodles over mashed potatoes, I was like, that is the craziest combination ever. It's good, but I was just like, I've never heard of that. But that's one of the things that we do. Worship service. You know, there's a lot that goes into our worship services. You see people passing trays, people leading songs, people offering prayers, people reading scriptures, people organizing the people who does what. You know, the media guys, there's a lot that is done with worship service. It's not just me up here talking. There's a lot. And in fact, I have the easier job. They have all the behind the scenes kind of deals. So there's a lot involved with that. And we could always use more people involved in worship services. Benevolence of food pantry. Look how much. This was from our Pack the Pulpit. And you know, the teenagers had this boastful thing about being the winners. We won. Adults. Yay. Which we should have. We have all the money, right? But here's the thing. Look how much we have given. And I love how Tom and Micah are now having us put things out right here, because visually we're helping people. And if you listen to the kids, they make known how many people we're helping each week. It's awesome. Home improvement ministry. You know, Alex and Gary are helping and offering to help and organize people to help with things that need to be done around. There's a lot of widows in our congregation who may need help. There's some people who just are like me and don't know how to do anything, you know? And so there's an offering to help, and to know how to use their giftedness and skills to do that is amazing. Transportation, you know, we've always offered, people need a ride to church. We have that beautiful red van that pick up people. Visitation and communion, I mentioned that. No, we can't forget about our shut-ins, and to help them commune with the Lord and stay connected with the church is important. Boy Scouts, you know, they're trying to build character within boys. And that popcorn, I bought some. It was really good. If you need some more popcorn next year, go see one of the Schaefer boys. The media team, you know, they do a lot. They're doing things so you can hear me right now. They record it. We actually have a YouTube channel that we're actually going to advertise here in a little bit. We could use some help on web design, so if you want to help with that, that's great. But, you know, our media guys do so much. That's a really big behind-the-scenes work. Church security. That's our very own Tony. And so Tony's a military police officer. You know, this is the world that we live in. I tell people the way I preach today, I would not be surprised if someone tries to shoot me. The great thing is, you get me, I'm sure Tony will take you out too. And so the great thing that we think about is, you know, protecting our cars during worship service, making sure our kids are safe. There's a lot of church security things, you know, making sure our kids are safe from predators and things like that. And, you know, making sure if someone tries to shoot me, you guys will take him out. You know, don't mess with Texas. I say don't mess with Indiana. Preaching. You know, it's not just me. One of the things that we want to do is we see that every healthy and growing church, especially as we see in Acts 13th chapter, is as churches grow, so should those who are trained to teach and preach. And so one of the things that we're also trying, one of our goals to and aspire to do, and you saw it last week with Tony doing it the other week, is that we want to include more men in our preaching, get more teachers and preachers, so you don't just hear me talk all the time. Because I'm limited. You know, there's so many godly men here who can share so many wonderful things that I would have never come up with from God's Word. And so that's one of our goals, is we're going to grow more preachers and teachers within our congregation. Because that's one of the things we want to do, is help build faith. LTC. If you have not registered yet, if you want to volunteer, see Tony. And a lot of great things. Peggy's doing a great job helping with the kids singing. Everyone participates in building up faith in LTC and our kids. So that's a wonderful experience. And I know all the kids enjoy it and love it. And it's one of the highlights of the year. So I encourage you to volunteer for it. Don't wait for them to ask you. You take the first step. Decor, supplies, and kitchen maintenance. This is what my office looked like when I first came here. I want to thank the ladies and Corey Wentz. But the building looks nice. We have supplies in our supply room for our teachers, kitchen maintenance. That doesn't all handle itself. And we need people who are involved in doing that. And that's one of the things that is also behind the scenes work that we don't see, but it's done quite frequently. The directory and picture board. One of the first things I did when I left Kokomo is I asked the eldership for a church directory so I could memorize most of your guys' names, because I'm so bad with names. I literally spent 4 months trying to memorize as many names as possible. And if I still don't know your name, or if I call you Joe, just say hi, just accept it. But the directory and our picture board. I love looking at our family, What do we fill in our houses? Family pictures. Our church building should be full of family pictures. Our library. We have this thing, and I know it's not digital, but we have these things called books, and this room full of them, and I know Teresa helps with them, and those resources are out there in order for you to help grow. If you need a book, take it and make sure you return it and put it back in the bin so Teresa doesn't have to try to find where to put it back correctly. But, build up resources for that. Men's ministries. We try to build camaraderie and brotherhood. That's what we're doing this weekend. Who's going to the men's retreat? I don't see enough hands. Okay. But one of the things we do is we spend time, we build up each other's faith. This is where we went to a Kokomo Jackrabbits game. We got smashed. But it was fun. But one of the things we do is we encourage each other. We have ladies' ministries as well. You'll have to ask the ladies what they do. They minister to each other, I guess. But actually, I'm just kidding. Actually, if you go on the board out there, you see a huge thing of the different things that the ladies do and how they volunteer for things. Guys, they put us to shame. Let's do more. In evangelism, sharing the work, sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. Friend days and things like that. We're actually trying to plan not only a friend day, but a kind of a build-up to friend day through a friend month in the month of December. And we're working with that, and some of our guys are helping work with that. And we're still in the planning phase and trying to figure everything out with that. But one of the things we want to do is build up the church so that you'll be equipped to share the gospel. I just went through that sheet, and everyone should have a list. Isn't it amazing how much we do for Christ? And I want you to think, how much more could we do for Christ if you were involved? And one of the things I want to encourage you to do is not only pray, but I encourage you to be involved. But when I also say be involved, I encourage you, just pick a few of the things on the list to be involved and do them well. Don't try to be involved in everything. You'll burn yourself out, and that's not good for you or the church. But pick a couple of them at least and be involved. And say, that's where I can be involved. And remember, it's not based on how talented you are, how smart you are, how gifted you are, your level of education. It's believing that the power of God and His Spirit can encourage and inspire you and motivate you to actually do His will. It's all based on God's power, not our own. And if we believe God can do all things more than we ask or imagine what we can do here in Kokomo. Imagine what God can do for you. In the past, we have called all these ministries the work of the church. Maybe we should redefine it and actually call it the work of Jesus Christ, because that's who we're serving, and that's who we're becoming like through service, and that's why we're doing it. So church family, let's be servants. Let's volunteer, and let's become great in the eyes of Jesus by being what He is, and that's a servant to all. At this time, as we're about to sing our song of invitation and encouragement, if today you need encouragement, if you want to come to Christ, or if you need us to pray for you, or if you want a Bible study and you don't want to stand before everyone in front of the church, come see me or one of the elders or Lynn or whoever, and let us do that for you. Let's encourage you and pray for you. And if you want to come forward for any reason, we offer you the invitation now as we stand and sing.
When we walk with the Lord in the light of His, what a glory.